It must be fantastic being a marsupial. I mean, right? Just think about it. Doesn't it just sound like the most amazing thing to be able to curl up and take refuge in the safety of your mom's pocket tummy? To be hopped around, fed, and occasionally come out to play with the other Joeys. Are you with me? I was recently back porching it with some friends, and we got on the topic of our childhood selves, right? And that sense of carelessness that maybe you had, if only for a while, right? As a child, and that sense of being worry-free, and also that sense, that easy connection to awe and wonder that we have as kids. It's striking, isn't it, that we spend so much of our lives trying to grow up, trying to become, wanting to get bigger than we are, when really the gift is already there in just being a kid. And sometimes I can't help but think that what fully growing up actually is finally giving your inner child permission to come out. Welcome back to the ecoChristian podcast. I'm your host, Caleb Cray Haynes, and we're exploring what it means to be Christian on planet Earth. It's no secret, there's a lot going on in the world today. Friends, I'm not here to give you the headlines. We don't need more of the headlines. At least I don't. But what we could use amidst the storms are some pockets, some places of refugia, not somewhere to necessarily hide, but places where life is nourished and resilience and care unfurl. And that's what we're talking about today with professor and author Debra Rienstra. So excited for this. A couple things first. There is a Creation Care Virtual Summit happening this March 2026. If you're listening to this in the year it was born, it's on Saturday, the 21st of March. It's $15, people. I'm linking the details in the show notes for you. Come on out. Shout out to my friends at the Evangelical Environmental Network, Creation Justice Ministries, and Arasha for partnering with me on that. And in fact, Debra, who is featured in this episode, her amazing husband, Ron, who works with Arasha, we'll hear from him at this event as well. So, pretty cool. Also, my new book, Earthbound Christian, Flourishing Within Limits in the Age of Infinite Growth, is out, friends. I'm in the midst of booking dates with churches and groups this year, so hit me up if you'd like me to come out, because it would be so much fun. One more thing. So Creation Justice Ministries, the Anabaptist Climate Collaborative, and the BTS Center have put their hands together and created a year-long exploration with the Claiming Your Call for a Climate Changed World program. It's really cool. It's going to start with a retreat in Maine. That's Maine, USA, in mid-May. So Maine in May. And anyway, it's free to apply, friends. A climate change world is one where extreme weather, human conflict, and division may increase, and where we just need more creativity and connectivity than ever before. And so, if this sounds like something that even begins to spark to pique your interest, check it out. It's free to apply, but registrations close on March 16th, 2026. So if this sounds like it could be up your alley, just apply. If it's before the 16th of March, check out the show notes for the link. Do it, friend. Okay. And now I'd like you to meet my friend, Debra Rienstra. Okay, friends, I'm here with my compadre, Debra Rienstra. She is a writer, speaker, and professor whose work explores the deep connections between faith, language, and care for the earth, offering thoughtful guidance for communities seeking wisdom and resilience in a time of disruption. which we are in, friends. Debra serves on the Research Advisory Board of the BTS Center and the Coordinating Committee for Third Act Faith. She is also active in several of her universities' campus-wide sustainability initiatives. Debra was raised in Michigan, holds a BA from the University of Michigan, and a PhD from Rutgers University. She and her husband, Ron, have 3 grown children, and when not writing or grading or reading, Debra enjoys figuring out how to garden, solving crossword puzzles, hiking in the dunes near Lake Michigan, or listening to very wonky podcasts, so which we are creating one right now. Greetings, friend.
Hi, Caleb. I'm so glad to be with you today.
Yeah, this is so overdue, and and I can't believe it's 2026, which is wild. I'm always like, what a time to be alive. I find myself saying that all the time because we connected with the EEN partner program cohort. I don't know, maybe 6 years ago or something. I'm not even sure.
We were their first cohort.
Yeah, the guinea
pigs. It does
feel
like forever ago, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, the way I remember it is that you and we were both writing at the same time. I was writing garbage theology, and you were writing Refugia.
And I remember 2020 or 2021.
Yeah, maybe even, yeah. So anyway, fast forward, here we are doing this thing. So yes, and I want to get into your book Refugia and the new one that you're writing. But obviously you're not just an author, you're doing things, and I really I feel like that your work has created ripples within the creation care space, and this idea and this term Refugia has become like it's sort of taking root, and I love how that has unfolded. And every time I talk with someone, they're like, "Oh, have you connected with Debra?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know Debra." Anyway, so it's just been so cool to see your work flourish and find life. And so, but before we do a backward spin dive into those waters, I'd like to hear a bit more what you're up to these days and how you're finding yourself in your own maybe spaces of Refugia lately.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm still teaching at Calvin in the English department. So I teach creative writing and British literature, which, believe it or not, actually becomes relevant because my field is the British Reformation, so 16th century, which was also a time of huge upheaval. So it has been astonishing to think about that. I have been sustained by my church community, I would say. In these last years, it's a very vibrant, forward-thinking community. We're not afraid to try things. We've been a sort of hippie artist commune. So that's maybe too much. Yeah, a sort of hippie artist since the 70s. So we do have a lot of artists and musicians, and I do serve as a musician for church. Play viola, believe it or not. And other than that, a lot of writing. I've been writing this Substack newsletter, and that has kept me up with climate news and allowed me to provide a sort of faith and climate news summary every week or every 2 weeks, which people seem to appreciate. So I'm just so grateful. You know, as you said, this Refugia idea has sort of made ripples, and that is amazing, even to me. I feel like I've been given this, well, sometimes I call it a tray of seedlings, right? I've been given a tray of seedlings, and I've been handing them out to people, and they're planting them, and they're growing, and it's just miraculous, even to me.
I love that. I love that image. That's really good. Yes. Yeah. I've been totally separate. You say a tray of tree seedlings. We've been talking here with my friend Jason how we need a tree Bible, and
I think we've got.
Yeah, we're having a tree Bible. So love it. So, friends, Debra's book, at least the one in my hand, is Refugia Faith, and she is in the middle with her husband. Do I have that right? Are you guys co-authoring this next one?
Yes, we're working together a lot. How it's going to turn out on the cover of the book, we're not sure yet.
Cool.
I do most of the writing, but I really need him for expertise, and he's helped so much. So we'll see how it kind of turns out in the end. We're very much in process.
Yeah, wonderful. And that one will be Refugia Church, which I love to hear about, because it's, I feel very much that's where my questions end up going as well. And so, I'd love to just maybe jump in from I'm going to say the 30,000 foot level for the people sort of sitting in the back. I've never picked this up, but maybe I've heard this term floating around. What is Refugia, and how do we begin to talk about it? It
was new to me too when I first learned about it, because I'm not a biologist or a wildlife manager or anything like that. But I have been reading a lot in science and nature writing in the past, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years, primarily to help with the Festival of Faith and Writing at Calvin University. And that has led me to a lot of wonderful nature writers like Kathleen Dean Moore. It's led me to Bill McKibben, who I follow pretty closely and I'm privileged to know now. But the idea of refugia is a form of resilience in nature. It's basically where little pockets of life survive in the midst of a big disturbance. That could be a wildfire, it could be a flood, it could be a volcano eruption. And what we have noticed in the natural world, and we've noticed this for a long time, and in fact, refugia was a concept that was first proposed by paleobiologists to talk about why anything survived the Ice Age. So the idea was, well, there must have been these little sheltered spaces where plants survived to carry on their DNA and little creatures survived to evolve another day. So it just struck me right away that these little places where, and the technical definition is where biodiversity can retreat to, persist in, and expand from under changing environmental conditions. It just struck me as this beautiful mechanism in nature, and also a really useful way to think about ourselves as people of faith. Can we be the people who find and nurture and even create refugia spaces, I've started to call them, not only in the natural world, I mean, literally creating refugia or protecting refugia in the natural world, but thinking of ourselves as cultural and spiritual people of refugia. Because as you say, we are in this time of severe disruption and disturbance and fear and anxiety and trouble. And it's overwhelming. It's just overwhelming. I'm sure all your listeners are feeling that too. And you feel very helpless, but we are not helpless, and we don't have to solve. I mean, I'd love to solve everything globally tomorrow. We'd love that, of course. And, God help us. Please do that, God. But meanwhile, the way to be faithful, I think, is to keep that big picture in mind and definitely work toward big systemic change, but also to prototype a life-giving, sustainable way of life on a small scale, because every big global crisis is felt locally in particular ways. And that's true of refugia and nature too. They're very particular, very local. Sometimes a particular spot is a refugium space for one species and not another. It just depends on the conditions. So working in small spaces is not insignificant, because those small spaces can grow and they can connect. That's what happens in the natural world. And that's what we can do now. I think there's this sort of network thinking that we need to adopt. We have thought, I think, especially in the West, especially in the affluent West, as a sort of top-down hierarchical, bigger is better, always push for more, that kind of thinking. And that's not really how nature works. And I don't think it's how we should be working as people of faith either. So that's kind of what I've been thinking about. Refugia Faith is my own journey. It's sort of memoir, it's nature writing, It's actually a lot of theology. I try to sort of tuck the theology in stealthily among everything else, just to tell stories. And a lot of it has to do with me reconnecting to a place that I love, Michigan, learning more about it than I ever have. I know so many more species names. I know a lot more about dunes now. I know a lot more about the history of Michigan, the exploitative lumbering and mining industries, and also the ways that people have tried to repair destruction in Michigan. And it's, connected me, as I say, connection, right? Connected me with this wonderful network of people of many faiths, especially Christians. Those are the people I hang out with the most. People of many faiths, just across denominations, working in small and innovative and faithful ways in their own spaces. And now we're connecting. So that's really exciting. We are literally, we are creating these networks. They are literal in a human sense, creating these networks. So Refugia Church, we're thinking, is going to be more about how to make these transformations, these spiritual transformations we need to make in community. Refugia Faith is a little bit more some transformations we need to make sort of within ourselves. But Refugia Church is going to be how to do this in faith communities, Christian communities in particular. Many churches, but not necessarily. We have Christian universities, we have nonprofit orgs, and we have gatherings of people who are not necessarily organized into churches or denominations. And so I'm gathering wisdom from a lot of people who've been working on this particular problem, and trying to summarize that wisdom, reading all the books so everybody else doesn't have to, so readers don't have to, right?
That's right. That's right.
It's a service I appreciate from scholars. So that's really what Refugia Church is about. How do we do this as a community? How do we think about the church differently than we've been thinking about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I'd love to back up a little bit. And there's just so much there. We, like you said, we are in this time where, I think I was saying before we hit record that, it just feels very dystopian all the time right now. And every time I feel like I open my phone, like I just saw the Endangerment Act, repeal, and all these things are going on, and I think that there is sort of a fight, flight, freeze, faint, kind of like we're all looking for our response here. And I think, so one of the things I feel like that, we're gleaning, or I'm gleaning at least from reading your book and, journeying with you over this time is how can Refugia be, a posture of response, and what does that look like for us? And you even just talking there, you kept saying the word small and sort of, and I know in your subtitle, like hidden shelters, ordinary wonders. And so, I'm curious if maybe we could just pause there for a minute. One of the other words that continues to surface when we talk about Refugia in your book is this word pocket. And I love that just keeps coming back. It's just the idea of a pocket. And there are a lot of different sizes and shapes and kinds of pockets. And you write about micro countercultures. And so, I wonder if you just maybe say a little bit more about sort of the little nature of Refugia and how that smallness has something to offer for us.
Thank you. Yeah, this is both the strength and the critique of this particular metaphor or way of thinking. The strength is that when people are feeling overwhelmed, the idea that small is not insignificant is so helpful. And I think about this in terms of Scripture and the story of the people of God throughout the Scriptures. They are never the dominant empire. We don't necessarily think about that, but Abraham, the family of Abraham, nobody in a tiny little tribe, the people of Israel, not important. I mean, even in the heyday of Israel and the kingdom, They were a small little fiefdom with huge machinations of empire, sort of grinding over top of them. And yet, this is the way God likes to work, through the small. Think of Jesus and the disciples and Jesus' parables of the kingdom. It's a mustard seed, it's yeast, it's a pearl. So the idea that small is not insignificant is both sociologically true, but it's also theologically true. It's the way God seems to like to work. So I think in that confidence, we can feel that creating small communities and even working within our established church congregations and other organizations, that is a way to do important good work, to focus on integrity and faithfulness and life-giving practices within those small communities, to focus on strengthening communal connections, exercising those communal muscles. That's hugely important. And it becomes a huge cultural change when all those small pockets start to connect. So that's, I think, what's really important about Refugia Church is that aspect of being nodes in a network rather than our own little fiefdoms, and nodes in a network not only with other people of faith, but with our communities. So to have this sort of, I've been thinking of the phrase coalition of moral witness in our communities, and we're seeing that happen in Minneapolis right now. Yes. Seeing people of Minneapolis, my son and his wife live there, so I hear about this from the inside a little bit. They live in St. Paul. But watch those people create community muscle. They are exercising those community muscles. And the clergy, I've been so thrilled to see clergy come out and create a sort of coalition of moral witness for the moment and say, this is not okay. So that, I think, that sort of connection and network building is part of this, but you still need to be strengthened in your small space. You still need to come to that larger work from a space of life-giving integrity.
Yeah. There's so much comes to mind there. But I think one of the bigger movements that is sort of underneath here is, just the gift that is smallness. And you're right, there is so much in scripture there. But I feel like, and this is kind of something I end up wrestling with in my new book, but it's like this, we're just so held captive by this idea of bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that has just trickled down so much, even in the church and church growth, and that sort of growthism mindset, and not to say we don't want the gospel to find its way to all four corners of the earth, but it does make you scratch your head, right? Well, is this how the gospel spreads, or is this how the gospel spreads through, I love this description of a network of nodes, and so even thinking from the perspective of, I've been a church planner a couple times in my life, and I always laugh because back in the day when you told someone, you told your district or whatever that you wanted to plant a church, and immediately you got in the mail all of these like thick church planting books that was like Church on Fire, like how to just do, and I almost feel like, and obviously I haven't seen or read your new book that you're working on, but I wonder if that's like, actually it's not just we're thinking about growth in a wrong way maybe here when it comes to I feel like a lot of, so I'm rambling a little bit, I'm realizing I'm going to land this plane.
It's okay.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of small churches feel more defeated rather than empowered, because of their I'm going to say, quote, littleness, right? But what if right? What if actually the little is what we need, right? It's not the consolation prize. It's actually maybe what the kingdom needs most is the locality of it, the homes and the small pockets of this. Like maybe we actually, that's what we need, and we need to sort of get over this. Let's get in the limelight. Let's make this one thing bigger, in order to see a Refugia church, a Refugia movement. Anyway, I'm just sort of, this is all happening live in my brain right now, but yeah.
You're absolutely right. I hang out with a lot of pastors. My husband is a pastor. We have, I don't know, all of our friends are pastors or musicians, it feels like, or both. And the pressure to grow is tricky because, yes, we're supposed to spread the gospel. That is the call, the Great Commission. But when our metrics are only about numbers and not about the quality of the discipleship, and that's hard to measure. So that's the problem. We know how to count heads. We can measure that. We know how to count dollars in a capital campaign. We can measure that. How do you measure faithfulness? That's harder. So that pressure to grow is just baked into the way people think. And small churches are in anguish because they remember the day when they had cultural dominance. Many of them do. And they had ample programs and tons of volunteers, and they did all the things, from bell ringing to youth retreats. And those churches feel like failures because they're smaller and they can't do all the things. But as you say, maybe we have to see that as a strength needed right now, the nimbleness of it. A small community can still be a long haul community, and that's what we need culturally now, is this model of faithfulness to each other. And I know it's hard. I've been around the church long enough to know that there's always something. Community is really hard, but I've also been so blessed to be parts of congregations that do last in the long haul and pretty much take care of each other and have their gifts. So small churches now, the BTS Center deals with this a lot on the East Coast. I think small churches now are struggling to get over their grief and sense of inadequacy, but they do have strengths. They all have particular strengths and charisms. And maybe the question now for small congregations like that is, what is our charism in this community right now? It could change. And who can we partner with so that we can do this work together? We don't feel like we all have to do all the things here in our small congregation. We can actually work together. And I think that's really what the church is called to do right now, to not build our own insular fiefdoms, but serve. The Pope Francis talked about a field hospital, and that has some merits as a metaphor, but to serve with moral witness and spiritual care, and our testimony of faith in the ultimate meaning of this planet and of human existence, and indeed of all creation. Our faith in that big meaning-making story, our ability with our rituals, the sacraments, but our other rituals too. The ritual is really powerful. It helps us with difficult threshold moments. So think about funerals. That is a terrible threshold moment. And we do funerals in order to have some ritual way of coping with it. And we should know how to do ritual really well in faith congregations. And, some of us do, some of us don't, but we have the skills in our tradition. We know how to repent, or at least we should. We know how to lament, or at least we should. We know how to pray. We know how to praise. We know how to have joy, or at least we should. Those are things people need right now, not just within our little congregations, but in our communities. And so to see ourselves as nodes in that community network and to offer ourselves as service, not just helping the poor, which of course, whatever that means in your community, but actually offering that kind of deep spiritual guidance and companionship to people who are really needing it right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just letting the gospel have the permission once again to be good news for the whole of the human body and, human experience in all of creation. Absolutely. And, sitting there, when you were talking and I was thinking about your book, I was thinking, how does, thinking about our metric, right? So, well, how does creation measure success, right? What is, we talk about healthy ecosystems, right? And it measures success when it's healthy. It offers life, right? Things co-flourish, but also things that are old die and then nurture the growth of new things. And so, meanwhile, we've created these other metrics that are totally separate from how God has ordered creation, the flourishing of creation. And so, just thinking about these examples of refugia in your book, you mentioned, obviously you highlight, it's wrapped in your story, as you have already said, and in Michigan and the Great Lakes, and you talk about the cottonwood tree and all these things, and you're bearing witness to flowers and creatures. And so, I guess, are there some places that you highlight in your book, or maybe even since writing, that have stood out to you that are kind of an encouragement or an inspiration in the plant or animal kingdom as examples of refugia that come to mind when you talk about this?
Yeah. Here in Michigan, I have noticed a lot of people catching on to the renativizing trend. So I'm seeing a lot of people doing work in their yards or businesses on their properties, tearing out turf, grass, and planting natives. So the summers here, and this is Grand Rapids, Michigan, the summers here, I see a lot more pollinators and native plant gardens. And that's a very simple, pretty quick reward kind of task. And what you're doing there is creating refugia for the foundation of the ecosystem, which is to say the pollinators, the insects and the pollinators. We have some in our yard that we have just loved in the summer, going out there in the middle of the day and just watching the pollinators. It's mesmerizing and therapeutic. And it is so wonderful to see they figure it out. We planted one of our native gardens 2 years ago. And even that first year, they came. The pollinators, like, how do they know? I don't know. They figure it out.
Yeah. And then where did they come from? I totally agree. We did a bunch of our house and they just show up and you're like, how do they know?
Yeah, right. On the other hand, we have these sort of marauding invasive deer. There's way too many Michigan. I mean, it's all tricky, right? There's no obvious utopian way to do this. Wildlife management and land management is tricky. I've been involved with West Michigan Land Conservancy or Land Conservancy of West Michigan, and they've done really lovely work, not only creating wild places. They do this by working with people to seed their land, but SEED, their land, but to put in their will land trusts so that they donate land that will then be kept wild. But then that land has to be managed. And so Land Conservancy of West Michigan has put together a number of wonderful parks. And of course, I love the dunes. The dunes are always, the lakeshore dunes here in West Michigan are really special. And the issues there have to do with people who want to build gorgeous big cottages on the dunes, which I completely get because it's awesome to have a place on the dunes. But we do have to be careful about that. Some are critical dunes that you really don't want to build anything there because they're still moving. These dunes are moving. And some of them are just a little more fragile and there's some very special ecosystems on that shoreline. So we do deal with all those complications here in Michigan. There's still a timber industry. There's still mining. So all of that has to be managed carefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking about, I guess the idea of management and sort of segue into this, you talk a lot in your book about the language we use, and especially I'm going to say the nicety of the terms like creation care and stewardship, and so often these phrases fall deeply short of the telos that is our intended relationship with God's creation. But also, to be honest, I feel like I struggle with this a lot because it's often an area that I continually, I'm speaking with other Christians on these topics, and there's a familiarity with these terms and these words, and especially I think for me, rooted in sort of a Wesleyan framework myself, stewardship is sort of a big springboard into environmental stewardship. And yet there's just so many problems that we can kind of trace back into here. Anyway, you circle back to that several times in your book. Would you be willing to speak to some of that and why you felt that was important here in Refugia for us to sort of entertain this reframing?
Yeah. I continue to complain about stewardship and creation care as terms to use. I do use them because, as you say, they are familiar to people. They feel unthreatening, which is good at first. I think they don't get to the fundamental transformation that we need in this period of history. We have become, as human beings, so many and so powerful that we can and have destroyed species and ecosystems. And right now, with greenhouse gases, we are destabilizing the climate. And this is serious, and it has implications, and it has already destroyed lives and livelihoods. So we have to take this seriously. And the terms creation care and stewardship still put us in an anthropocentric position apart from and over creation. And I don't think that is actually the biblical witness. It has been interpreted as such for quite a few generations, very reductively, in order to make colonialism and the Industrial Revolution seem nicer and be theologically permissible. Honestly, we see this in the documents, in the writings, in the literature across the last 400 or 500 years. We see it. So I think we need to realize we have gotten too big for our britches as human beings, and we need to step back from that position of kind of arrogant apartness and anthropocentrism and realize that we also are very vulnerable bodies on a planet. We are not over and above separate brains on a stick. And there's a lot we don't know. I think we don't respect science properly when we pretend we know exactly how to manage this planet. We don't. We know a lot of things, and we should be using all those things that we know. But we still make a lot of mistakes, and some for well-meaning reasons. The way that the fisheries of Michigan have been managed, there's been a lot of well-meaning mistakes. Sometimes for nefarious reasons of greed and disregard for other people and other creatures. So I think we are in need of moving toward a kind of humility and a sense of ourselves as citizens of the whole biotic community. I think that is just honest anthropology and honest response to the science. It doesn't mean that we give up our distinction as humans, as made in the image of God, etc. Doesn't mean that, but it does mean we need to be more humble. It means we need to be more humble, and we need to have what Robin Wall Kimmerer calls reciprocity with the creation, rather than just seeing it as this sort of backdrop to the story of human redemption and our pantry and our sewer. That is not sustainable, and it's certainly not what we are called to be as human beings on this planet. So we've gotten away with it for a long time, with plenty of damage done to other people and to land and creatures and waters and oceans. Now we need to be more humble and continue to pursue ways to give back to creation, to sustain, to care. So creation care and stewardship, I think, also don't necessarily communicate immediately the urgency and the need for healing. We often go back to Genesis and say, this is we got to talk about Genesis. This is what we're supposed to do as humans. Yes. However, Genesis 1 and 2 are, before the fall. And we are living in a world post-fall, however you want to think about that. So it's not just about nice creation care and stewardship. It's actually about healing and repentance and repairing damage.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sort of unpacking some of that. I think that we don't often really consider how these words and how these terms are baked into our behaviors and all the things we're doing as the people of God, and how they reframe in little ways that we haven't really even considered how we go about relating to the natural world, I'm going to say, which I'm always qualifying, because we are part of the natural world. And that's the whole shift toward kinship, or, whatever the language is that's helpful for you, into seeing like we are of and within. And this is, one of the things that the Genesis narrative does confirm, part of creation, part of the ground and the soil as God intended it on purpose, and like we are of this ecosystem intentionally. It's like, I think we can all confess that humanity's not an accident, is at least what I think most of us agree on. And so therefore, what is the posture, what is the ramifications of that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I was thinking about sort of a similar thread, like, how do you see the concept of Refugia bumping up against mainstream Christianity? And, and you have these great movements in your book, from this to that, and from despair to preparation, alienation to kinship. And there's so much we could talk about there. But, is there one or two particular movements that rise up as maybe this is kind of the needed friction for us as the church in this moment we're in?
Oh, what a good question. I don't know if I can answer it without Argyle days. Well, I'd like to say they're all important. Yeah.
Sure.
I think maybe the ones that create the most friction would be consuming to healing. And there we're trying to shift a whole anthropology, ecclesiology, and a kind of an anthropology that's based on economics, based in economic principles, that we are, in this sort of neoliberal economic worldview, we are consumers with preferences, and that is how we interact with the world. We select things, we purchase them, we use them, we throw them away. Mm-hmm. That is sort of our whole anthropology, the neoliberal economic. And we live in that sort of big story, especially in affluent societies. But that is not the picture of who we are as people of faith. We are people who are deeply connected to this planet and to God. And our role is a lot more than just consuming things, making things, consuming things, and throwing them away. So that one is hard. The idea that fundamental way of seeing ourselves that we interact with and practice every day, all of us do, that's how we operate, is so at odds with the basic way of flourishing life that I think we're called to. It's hard to articulate this, but the idea of healing, consuming to healing, so consuming the planet, basically, to seeing ourselves as active healers of the planet and of each other, The capitalist way of thinking is very competitive. It's very isolating. And we're just used to that. It's hard to see something else that we're called to. So that one, I think, causes a lot of friction, just, in our natural resistance to it. And then the other one, I think, that I've wondered about a lot is passivity to citizenship. I think for generations, we in the church have thought of ourselves as sort of sitting easily side by side with the American dream, the dreams of affluence and gain for self and security. And, those are good things. I'm not saying we should all wear sackcloth every day and, eat nothing but meat. Yeah. But we have been too easily lured into being the handmaidens of American affluence, and we have sort of lost our micro counterculture, right? That micro counterculture impulse. We're seeing it come back, I think, right now on the prophetic edge of the church. But boy, it's going to be an uphill climb because we all want safety and security and affluence. And of course we do. Of course we do. But I think because of that, we have been lured into being too easily sitting side by side with the powers and the principalities. And those are the powers and the principalities that seek to dominate the planet as well as other people and the global wealth available to them. It's all kind of the same impulse of domination. So I think the time has come to say, we can't operate this way. It's unsustainable.
Yeah, I think you're naming some of the most difficult pieces for us, I'm going to say in America at least, or in our areas of comfort, is all of this just requires action, to say it simply, I suppose. But we're just so doggone comfortable. And so what is the tipping point? And obviously this is what, we're writing books and recording podcasts and, jumping up and down in the classroom. And so, but also there's just the steady beat, which is the engagement within the Refugia, the creating the pockets, the drawing down, I suppose, which is within that, I feel like, begins to just embody the hope and realize that, all I have is the steady beat of my life and of my heart that I can continue to show up and be me every day. And so I know we're probably running out of time here. I wonder if you could give us just a taste of Refugia Church, some of the connection points you're hoping to make there, and sort of this little taste, little teaser, and maybe when the book's coming out as well.
Oh, thank you. We are aiming for early 2027. Fortress is doing it again, which I'm really grateful for. Fortress did Refugia Faith. So we're thinking that the first chapter is going to be sort of where we are, and it looks at some of these big demographic issues, church decline, political engagement, the lack of engagement in climate work among American churches. The second chapter is what if we rethink ecclesiology, and we're going back to sort of the fundamental marks of the church and the activities of the church that have been reflected upon for hundreds of years, and thinking, what is an ecoecclesiology? Ecochristianpodcast.
Love that.
My friend Dave came up with that one. And then the next whole bunch of chapters are stories of churches and groups who are doing this kind of work. So I've got a couple great stories about churches who have put in geothermal and solar and native gardens, and doing it. I mean, we should all be doing that sort of thing, but doing it with very explicit and joyful connections to faith. I've got a story about a church in Hawaii that's rewilding a golf course they came into possession of.
That's so good.
And doing that, in the whole watershed with other groups who are bringing in traditional indigenous Hawaiian ways of thinking with Christianity. There's a lot of resonance. It's really beautiful to see. I have a chapter that involves the Black Church Food Security Network in Baltimore, Maryland. Well, it's based in Baltimore, but it's all up and down the East Coast. So that's a whole food shed that has arisen through networking with Black farmers and Black churches. I mean, it's really a beautiful story. I know you interviewed Heber Brown, so your listeners might know about that. It's a great Refugia story. We're going to have a chapter on resilience and resilience hubs, on advocacy, and then worship and preaching. So we're going to see what we can summarize from what people have learned about shifting worship to involve attention to creation itself and, the more than human creation, to invite our awareness that we enter into the praise of God with all of creation. And how do you do that? How do we use our skills with ritual to help everybody sort of deal with the grief and the change and the upheaval that we're all dealing with? And then there's going to be a couple chapters on like how to do this. So how do you get a grief together? And, sort of nuts and bolts, what we've learned from cohort programs. And then a chapter on ideas we should probably put on the compost pile. So that's where I'll deal with arrogant forms of stewardship and paranoia about pantheism, for example, what that means, why we're paranoid, why we can, sort of relax. And then the final chapter is going to be about Sabbath as a practice that we need to come back to in some way. I know it's not easy, but in some way come back to the practice of Sabbath as a fundamental creation justice practice.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things about refugia, right, in nature is they're not safe necessarily. They're relatively safe, but they're not entirely safe. They're not easy or comfortable. But I think they are joyful, if I can say that about the natural world. And they certainly are in the human world. It has just amazed me to be among people who are doing this work who, yes, feel overwhelmed. Yes, like you say, we just pedal really hard. We face a lot of frustration, but there's also such joy. And I think that's a sign that this is where the Spirit is leading us.
Amen. That's where I'm coming back to all the time. Like where's the joy? Let's bring it back. Let's get it back in here in the room, because I don't think there's any way forward without it, really. And we need it so bad. And Debra, thank you so much. This is just, I feel like this could go on. This is just so good. And, I was just thinking, I feel like one of the ways that I'm, I don't typically say about receiving hope, but I guess for the sake of what I'm trying to communicate, when I'm receiving hope here from Refugia and everything, is just seeing my pocket, I'm going to say, of what I'm doing as part of a bigger group of pockets and a bigger group of churches and people like you and others who the network is only getting thicker. The network is only getting stronger. And I think you mentioned Minneapolis, and that's really what I feel like that moment has taught us, is that once those networks are established, it's happening there. They don't get unestablished. It's moving. And I think that is so encouraging. And I would say for listeners out there feeling a little bit alone or a little bit discouraged, I think this is an encouraging way to think about the pocket of ministry or life that you're living, that it's a network of refugia. Yeah, thank you for that.
It's been so fun to talk to you, Caleb. What a delight. Thank you.
Until next time, we've got a lot to look forward to with your next book, and so maybe we can get both you and Ron on here and we'll have some fun.
Oh, that'd be great.
Okay, friends, before we go, here is the practical action for the week. I feel like I need a special jingle here for this segment. So here it is. Let your grass grow. Let your grass grow, friends. It's only March, but y'all, here in Nashville, it's like some folks are standing on their porch with a gas can ready to whip out that mower at the first blade of grass. And I say it every spring, but just letting your lawn get fuzzy, hairy, and blossomy is just so important for our pollinators. I did a whole episode on this last year. Find it. There's so much there. But this is one of those times where actually just doing nothing, okay, has a huge impact. So don't be afraid to let that grow. Let that grass grow, friends, for a couple months. The pollinators need it. The soil needs it. Our food needs it. You need it. Creation needs it. It's God's design. And that's all I got to say about that. Okay. If you can, friends, leave a review on your app. It does help people find this podcast. Share it with one person this week. So much love. Next time.